The airport was buzzing with the usual chaos, families hugging goodbye, business travelers rushing with briefcases, and announcements echoing through the terminals. Among the crowd was David Johnson, a well-dressed black man in his mid-40s. Calm, composed, and carrying only a small leather bag, he walked confidently toward the boarding gate of his flight to Washington, D.C. But as David handed over his boarding pass, the pilot, a tall, stern-looking man named Captain Miller, stepped out of the cockpit and blocked his path. His voice was cold, cutting through the air. "I'm sorry, sir, but you won't be boarding this plane today." David blinked, confused. "Excuse me? There must be some mistake." "There's no mistake," Captain Miller snapped, his tone sharper now. "I don't feel comfortable flying with you on board." The passengers nearby went silent. Some gasped, others whispered. The gate attendant looked horrified but too nervous to speak up. David's calm eyes met the pilot's, and he understood what this was. It wasn't about security. It wasn't about rules. It was about the color of his skin. "Are you saying," David asked slowly, "that you won't fly this plane because I'm black?" The pilot stiffened, glancing around as if to find support. "I make decisions for the safety of my aircraft. That's final." The humiliation in that moment was heavy, pressing down on David, but he stood tall, refusing to let anger show. The crowd grew restless, people pulling out their phones, recording. Some passengers spoke out. "This is discrimination. You can't do that. He's done nothing wrong." But the pilot didn't budge. He crossed his arms like a man certain he wouldn't be challenged. David sighed, reached into his jacket pocket, and calmly handed his boarding pass back to the attendant. But instead of walking away, he pulled out a sleek black leather wallet. He flipped it open and revealed a golden badge glinting under the airport lights, his FBI credentials. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The security team that had arrived, ready to escort David out, froze in their tracks. Their eyes widened as they saw the badge. The murmurs grew louder, passengers craning their necks to see. David's voice was steady, commanding. "I am Special Agent David Johnson, Federal Bureau of Investigation. And I'd like to know why a licensed commercial pilot thinks he has the authority to racially profile a federal officer in front of dozens of witnesses." The color drained from Captain Miller's face. The terminal was now buzzing with tension. Phones were still recording, and the passengers were no longer silent. They were angry. Unbelievable. Is this even legal? You can't treat people like this. The security guards, who had initially come forward to escort David out, now stood frozen. They exchanged nervous glances, realizing this was no ordinary passenger. One of them stammered, "Sir, we didn't know you were FBI." David closed his badge carefully and slid it back into his jacket pocket. His composure was unshaken, but his eyes were sharp, fixed on Captain Miller. "I shouldn't need to flash a badge," he said firmly. "My citizenship, my humanity, should have been enough." The words struck deep. Some passengers nodded, clapping lightly in agreement. A woman in the crowd said loudly, "That's right. You don't need to prove yourself to fly like the rest of us." Captain Miller shifted uncomfortably. His face was pale now, but his pride wouldn't let him back down easily. I was just acting in the interest of safety," he muttered, his voice quieter than before. "Safety." David raised an eyebrow. "Tell me, Captain, what exactly made me unsafe? The color of my skin? Or the fact that I carry myself with confidence?" The silence that followed was heavier than anything that had been said before. The entire waiting area stared at the pilot, waiting for his answer, but none came. At that moment, the head of airport security, Officer Ramirez, spoke with authority. "Captain, step aside. We'll handle this." The pilot looked shocked. "What? I'm the one in command of that aircraft. You can't just—" "Command doesn't give you the right to abuse power," Ramirez snapped. "Right now, you've compromised passenger trust and violated federal law. You'll report to the airline board immediately." Gasps rippled through the crowd. A man shouted, "Yeah, take his wings." A woman added, "He shouldn't be flying if he can't see past his prejudice." David remained calm, but his words carried the weight of years of injustice. This isn't just about me. How many others have you quietly denied boarding? How many stories like this never made it to the cameras? Passengers nodded, some recording every word. The video was already going viral, hashtags and live streams spreading the story far beyond the airport. At that moment, two airline executives rushed into the scene, alerted by the commotion. One of them, a woman in a sharp gray suit, looked directly at David. "Agent Johnson, we sincerely apologize. This behavior does not reflect our airline's values." Her words were polished, but the anger in the crowd proved it wasn't enough. David turned to her. "An apology means nothing if nothing changes." "People need to F," the passengers erupted in agreement, voices rising. "He's right. Enough is enough. Do better." The executive's face tightened. She knew the situation was spiraling into a public relations nightmare. She glanced at Captain Miller, who stood red-faced and speechless, his authority stripped away. Finally, she announced, "Effective immediately, Captain Miller will be suspended pending a full investigation." The crowd cheered. Phones captured the moment. Justice was finally in motion. David, however, didn't gloat. He simply picked up his carry-on and said calmly, "I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I came here to fly, just like you'll safe when they fly, not judged before they even step on board." The passengers erupted in agreement, voices rising. "He's right. Enough is enough. Do better." The executive's face tightened. She knew the situation was spiraling into a public relations nightmare. She glanced at Captain Miller, who stood red-faced and speechless, his authority stripped away. Finally, she announced, "Effective immediately, Captain Miller will be suspended pending a full investigation." The crowd cheered. Phones captured the moment. Justice was finally in motion. David, however, didn't gloat. He simply picked up his carry-on and said calmly, "I didn't come here to humiliate anyone. I came here to fly just like everyone else. But today a line was crossed, and the world is watching." The applause grew louder, echoing through the terminal like thunder. Passengers gathered around David, some shaking his hand, others thanking him for standing firm. For the first time that day, David allowed himself the faintest smile, not for victory but for hope. Hope that maybe this time, change would follow. The boarding gate finally reopened. Passengers began to file into the plane, but this time, the atmosphere was different. They weren't just boarding another flight. They were stepping into a moment that had already made history. As David approached the gate, Officer Ramirez gave him a respectful nod. "Safe travels, Agent. And thank you for standing tall. People needed to see this." David shook his hand firmly. "I didn't plan to make a scene, but sometimes silence can be the loudest mistake." He stepped onto the plane, greeted by the new captain, a calm, professional woman who extended her hand. "Agent Johnson, welcome aboard. With me, you'll have nothing to worry about. Everyone here is equal." The gesture, simple yet powerful, carried the respect that had been denied to him earlier. As David walked down the aisle, passengers whispered words of support. "Thank you for speaking up. You handled it with dignity. You made us proud." He placed his bag in the overhead compartment and settled into a seat. For the first time that day, the weight on his shoulders began to lift. Out the window, the sun was setting, its golden light washing over the tarmac, a symbol, almost poetic, of endings and new beginnings. As the engines roared to life, David leaned back, his thoughts heavy yet hopeful. He knew this wasn't just about one pilot or one flight. This was about countless others who faced prejudice every day, often without cameras or witnesses to protect them. He whispered to himself, a quiet vow. This fight isn't over. But today, justice spoke. The plane lifted into the sky, leaving behind the chaos of the airport, but carrying with it the message that had spread across the world. Prejudice may try to ground you, but truth and justice will always help you rise. The camera would fade on the image of the plane soaring through the clouds, free, unbound, and powerful, just like the man inside.